What's up guys, welcome back to another episode of GripWorks. As you just saw, I pulled the B20 out of my little storage area and I performed a couple of tests. I did a leak down test and a makeshift compression test, but I did those things to give me peace of mind as far as the health of this engine, because I am in the process of ordering parts to do the swap and I want to make sure this engine is good before I continue moving forward. And I'm happy to report that everything came back within spec, so that thing's good to go, but that's for a later episode. In this episode, I have the Civic back in here and we're going to be doing a few suspension changes to this car to kind of make the car a little bit more drivable, a little bit more functional. I will go over all of those things in detail, but the first thing I got to do is I got to jack this thing up, take the wheels off and start removing some suspension parts. So I got the entire car torn down. I got all the tools put away because that's as far as I can get tonight. But I got the rear hubs and rotors and coilovers out of the car, as well as the front upper control arms and front coilovers. Like I said, I'm out of time for tonight, so I'm gonna pick this back up tomorrow and I'll go ahead and go over everything that's going on here in detail. Alright guys, it's a few days later. I'm back here in the shop with the Civic, and as you just saw, I got a bit of a head start and I started replacing the wheel studs on the rear hubs with ARP extended studs. And this is mainly for peace of mind. I kind of felt like the thread engagement on the rear studs was low with the Motegi wheels, and it was most likely fine, but just for added safety and peace of mind, I wanted to go ahead and throw these studs in. They're pretty inexpensive and really easy to put on, especially if you have a press, but there's other tools you can use to put these on. So a quick and easy upgrade for the rear hubs. It also makes putting your wheels on fairly simple because they won't just fall off the car. The studs will kind of hold them in place. So that's that. These are ready to get put back on. And I also started to clean the front upper control arms. These are going to be replaced with Truhart, like tubular upper control arms with spherical bearings on the ends. But until that happens, this is just kind of a temporary setup. All these really need is the ball joints to be replaced, and I was able to get a new set of ball joints for these. So I'm just gonna mark these on the bottom with a Sharpie and kind of line up the new ball joints here. And that's just to kind of get the alignment kind of close to where it was. It's gonna change a lot because I'm changing the front right height, but I just need to make it like 4 miles down the street to my alignment guy. So it's not that big of a deal. So I'm gonna go ahead and replace these ball joints, and then I'm gonna talk to you guys about the front coilovers. What I have here is one of the front coilovers, and this is a Function 4 Type 1 coilover. These are super old, but they work fine. This is another temporary part because I will be replacing these with a new set of Truhart coilovers. So the reason why I pulled these out is because I want to do a spring swap on the front and rear coilovers. Now again, this is a temporary thing because I am gonna have new coilovers as soon as I can, but I have a track day coming up and I need to stiffen up the car. So this is the stock configuration, and this has a 10K spring in the front. And what I have here is the other side, and this is actually a Truhart spring that is a 12K. So my plan here is I'm going to be replacing the front springs with the 12K Truhart springs, and I'm going to be moving these factory function and form springs to the rear of the car so that I can have a 12K front, 10K rear. What I have right now is like a 10K front, 4K rear, and the rear of the car is way too soft. I've never really liked the way the car felt. The whole car has a lot of body roll even with the sway bar, so I kind of wanted to stiffen the whole car up, and I think this is a good temporary solution, which is just, you know, a quick little spring swap. I'm also going to be raising the front ride height by about 1/2 inch. That's going to take a few tries because this is a stiffer spring and it won't compress as much as these here. So I might actually split the difference. I might do a 1/4 inch higher than this. I'm gonna take the measurement from the top hat to the top of this red shock body and then translate that over to this one, but a 1/4 inch higher. Once this one's set, I'll take the spring off of this one, swap it with the 12K and match these two, and then I can put these in the car. And like I said, these 10K springs are gonna move to the back of the car, and it should stiffen up the ride of the car, and I think it'll handle a lot better. So I'm gonna go ahead and take some measurements off of this and then set this one up. So I have both coilovers set up with the new springs here, and I have it a 1/4 inch higher than it was before. So I think that 1/4 inch height difference coupled with the stiffer springs will yield a higher front end ride height, which is what I'm looking for, because the car had a bit of a rake to it. So I'm trying to level it out, and I don't want to lower the rear and leave the front alone. I'd rather raise the front to meet the rear so that I have more ground clearance for like the front lip and the side skirts and stuff. So these are all set up. I'm gonna go ahead and throw these in the car, and then I'm gonna go ahead and move on to the front lower control arms. Alright guys, so we got the front lower control arm out of the car. This is the driver's side, and I have the Truhart arm here for comparison. This is spherical. On this one I have like an OE bushing in the front side and a energy suspension polyurethane in the rear, and then this is a energy suspension compliance bushing. I would like to replace that with a spherical in the future, but for now I have this loose and I can crack this open like that, and now we can fully compare the Truhart unit with the factory one. I got a OE rubber bushing here versus spherical, and a polyurethane bushing back here versus spherical. So the advantages of having spherical bearings versus bushings is that a spherical bearing allows for more articulation in the suspension, and it also eliminates any slop, so there's no movement in any direction. So it can move freely but without any slop. And the reason why you want articulation is to prevent binding, which would be like a rapid spike in spring rate, which would cause your car to understeer or oversteer. It also allows for a more steady alignment. So you align your car to optimize tire contact patch on the ground in corners, but if your suspension has a lot of slop or flex in it, then that alignment goes out of whack. You lose contact patch in your tire, which means you lose traction in the corners, technically on the straights as well. So those are the advantages of spherical bushings, and Truhart has a lot of spherical components for these Hondas. I should have a discount code for Truhart suspension. If I do, it'll be down in the description. So regardless, go down, click their link, check them out. They make amazing products and I fully recommend them. These are really, really nice pieces. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go ahead and bolt up the arm to the other half of the control arm, torque it to spec, and then I can go ahead and reinstall everything. Alright guys, so it's been a couple days. I got the whole front end of the car done. I got those Truhart spherical front lower control arms installed. I got the rear ARP studs installed. I swapped those springs in the front. to the 12K and I adjusted the ride height by a little bit. I pulled it up a 1/4 inch in the front. So that's basically set up. And now we're gonna move on to the rear coilovers, and that's where it gets a little bit weird. So being that this is a temporary setup, I kind of cobbled together a few parts here, and I wanna show you guys what I'm doing so that you understand what it is that I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So this is the Tane rear coilover that came out of the car, and this is how basically they are from the manufacturer. And they're a good coilover. They actually have damping adjustment and everything, and they look a little rough, but they're in excellent shape. And I wanna use these for the next track event, and I'll keep using these until I get my new coilovers. But for now, what I need to do is I need to stiffen these up a bit. These actually come with a 4K rear spring, and that is way too soft for this application. In my opinion, it's too soft for a street car, let alone a track car. So these 4K springs have to go. Now, as you saw, I put 12K springs in the front, and I have these function form 10K springs left over. So what I want to do is I want to transfer the front springs to these rear Tane springs. That way I have a 12K front, 10K rear, which is so much better than what I had before, which was 10K front, 4K rear. So we're going from a 4K rear to a 10K rear. So I am more than doubling the rear spring rate. Now what that is going to do for me is that is going to reduce a lot of body roll in the car. I have the rear sway bar set, I think, to soft. I'm not sure, but I don't want to rely too much on the sway bar. I want to leave the sway bar as my last adjustment, and I want to get most of my body control from the coilover. Now that presents a challenge. As you can see, the new spring is quite a bit shorter than the old spring. Now it's stiffer, so it won't compress as much under load. This will, but I need to compensate for that extra space so that the spring doesn't just flap around and cause damage to the shock absorber when the rear wheel is under full droop, or when weight transfer is applied to the car and the rear wheel or that rear corner will extend. You don't want to have that spring just flopping around. You want the spring to always be under tension. And one of the issues that I was having already with the rear is I couldn't really lower the spring anymore because I was losing all preload. These don't have independent preload adjustment from ride height adjustment, which is a big drawback to these coilovers. What I kind of came up with here was using a helper spring. Now what a helper spring does, it's really only serves one purpose, and that is to keep the main spring from moving around. It keeps preload on the spring when the shock body can't do the preload itself. So what this will do is this will stack either on top or under your main spring, and it'll keep the spring under tension when the suspension is under full droop. And that actually will soak up the rest of the space that I didn't have before. Now, my gripe with this is that I couldn't get a spring locator in time. So what I did is I 3D printed this spring locator ring here, which sits, in between the helper spring and the main spring, and kind of keeps the two springs from shifting. Now, many of you will believe that a 3D printed part will break, and that is true, but a lot of these locating rings are actually made of plastic. Probably like a very thin phenolic or an ABS plastic that you buy from companies like Swift. And Swift Springs is a very reputable manufacturer, and theirs are made out of plastic. And what I use is a carbon fiber infused nylon, which is a very, very hard material. It's very, very strong. I believe it has very similar characteristics to a 5000 series aluminum. So I think that they're gonna work just fine because all it's doing is keeping the two springs from shifting. But if I can avoid using this whole setup, I would like to. So what I wanna do is I wanna keep things simple. Now this is where a couple parts that Lewis brought for me come into play. A long time ago, Lewis had some custom top hats made for his coilover setup that he used to have on his car. Now if you see the top hats that these come with are a very factory style top hat. What he did is he got some extended top hats made, and he actually has a medium one and a very large one. And what this will allow me to do potentially is to just run the main spring by itself. So for example, this will go here with bushings or whatever, and it will, it'll give me that. But the issue is I will lose a lot of travel with this. This set here, this tall set, will slip on, and it actually, kind of lines up quite well, and I can still lower the car a bit more. The only thing I'm worried is that this will make the car way too low in the back. But there's only one way to find out, and that is going to be to change these up, get them in the car, and get the car on the ground so that I can see how the car sits. I'll take it out and drive it up and down the street, bring it back in here and kind of see how the car sits. I'm going to have to keep playing with the front and rear ride height until I get the ride height where I want it, and then I can get the car aligned. I hate the whole, trial and error method, but I have so many mixed and matched components here that I really don't think I have time to try to calculate what will work here. I'm gonna just have to try a couple of different combinations and see what works. Now, you guys saw at the beginning of the video that it's kind of a pain to get the car jacked up. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna actually remove the front bumper right now, since I will be lowering the car quite a bit at this stage, and having the bumper off the car will make jacking the car up quite a bit easier. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove the front bumper. I'm gonna get these coilovers put together, get them in the car, and start playing with ride height and see what works. And I think I'm going to try this first, this funky looking top hat. That way I run just the main spring, and who knows, if this works on the first shot, then I'll roll with this for now until I get my new Truhart coilovers, and this will get me through the next track day. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that from me. Okay, so I kind of want to try this first. What I did here is I just left the spring, I used the medium-sized top hat, and I moved the collars up. Now the problem that I'm going to have with this combination is that if I need to raise the car any higher, I'm going to start adding a ton of preload to it. If I need to lower the car, I'm going to start running into spring slop. So I kind of just want to try it. I mean, it's really close. It's actually a little short. It's quite a bit actually shorter than, I don't know, it's hard to tell. I just gotta start somewhere. So I'm gonna start with this. I'm gonna go ahead and convert this one over to this setup, get these in the car, get the car on the ground, and see what it looks like. So I have the car on the ground, and surprisingly enough, the rear ride height actually looks, I mean, it's kind of hard to tell on camera, but the rear ride height is actually almost exactly where I wanted it. I mean, I can fit about a finger, almost 2 fingers in, and that it still hasn't settled. And it's actually exactly the same on the other side, about almost 2 fingers worth of gap. I think that's perfect on the rear. You might also notice that I removed the center caps off the wheels, and that's actually a rule in VTEC Club. You have to have the center caps off so that you can visually inspect your axle nuts and your hub nuts. So I can see the nuts there and there. More importantly, I can see the axle nuts while I'm torquing my wheels between sessions, and I can visually inspect that they are tight. So that is why we removed the center caps. But yeah, rear looks good. So I'm kind of happy that I got that combination on the first try. I think I'm gonna leave the rear alone. The front is a little high. So I'm not sure how well you guys can see that, but the front is quite a bit higher than I'd like it to be. So luckily enough, the front is pretty easy to adjust. So before I take the car out around the block, I'm gonna jack the front up and lower the front about, I wanna say about a 1/4 inch. Yeah, I'm gonna lower the front about a 1/4 inch. And then go ahead and drive the car out and then see how it settles. right guys, so I got the ride height pretty much exactly where I wanted it. I have about an inch gap on all 4 corners. I think that is a good functional height, especially since I have to consider tire rub. These are a 28 offset wheel, and these cars usually like to have a 35 offset wheel, which sinks the wheel in more. Since these are a little bit more aggressive, I have to be conscious of the tire contacting the fender or the quarter panels. But I feel like the combination of the higher ride height with a little bit more camber, I think is gonna take care of that issue. But I think the 1 inch gap on all 4 corners looks pretty damn good in my opinion. I pretty much have it perfect, I think, from what I can tell. I mean, this floor isn't really even, which isn't the ideal way to set ride height, but I'm doing the best that I can with what I have. And you know, I think that looks pretty good. So there's a couple of things that I wanna do while I have the bumper off the car. And one is to take care of the majority of this rust here. This has been bothering me for a long time, and I have the die grinder here, so I kind of want to grind away as much as that surface rust that I can. I mean, it is all just surface rust. I want to grind away as much of that surface rust as I can, and then kind of give those areas a coat of, you know, maybe like a self-etching primer or some sort of paint, just to kind of stop that rust or at least slow it down a little bit. So I'm going to take care of that, and then I'm going to move on to the next thing. Alright guys, so I have like the really bad areas of the radiator support cleaned up. I knocked off the majority of the surface rust, and I just hit it with some primer. I'm really not going for a restoration level repair here. I just wanted to address some of the surface rust and kind of slow it down for now. Eventually, I would like to strip the whole car down and kind of really go through this thing and clean all the rust up. But for now, this will do. And what I want to do now is I want to move on to these toe straps. I have 2 of these, and I want to have one on the front and the rear on opposite corners. Now, the point of having a toe strap is so that if you go off on track and you get stuck on the gravel or the grass, the staff at these racetracks are able to pull you out without damaging any of your suspension. Because if you don't have toe straps or toe hooks, they're gonna hook onto whatever they can reach, and that could be a control arm or your radiator support, and they could bend that up, and it's really not on them, it's on you for not having toe straps or toe hooks. So I want to get that addressed, and I kind of want to tie it into this what used to be the bumper support / crash beam, whatever you guys want to call it. But there is a bolt here that goes to the frame, so I'm literally just going to remove the bolt, pass it through this buckle, and then tighten that up. And then what I want to do is I want to cut a slit into the front bumper where this can protrude at a straight, you know, horizontal plane once it's tightened down. And that will give me a secure access point to pull the car up. And this is also really useful if you have a winch on a trailer. You can use this to winch your car onto a trailer. So yeah, this hole here, this bolt that you guys can't really see, but this seems like the best spot to put it in, and it'll just kind of hang out, and all you will see out of the bumper is just this part right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and loosen this bolt and stick this guy in there. All right guys, so that's gonna wrap it up. We did a ton of stuff to the car in this video. We got the rear ARP studs on. We got the spring swap on the coilovers. We went from 10K 4K to 12K 10K. That is a huge improvement. We got the ride height kind of set a little higher than it was before for functionality. We did the replacement on the Buddy Club upper control arm ball joints. We did the Truhart spherical lower control arms in the front. We did the front and rear toe straps. That coupled with the wider 225 tires and all of the little things that we did to this car is all gearing towards this weekend's track day at Buttonwillow, which is gonna be the next video. I'm really excited to set a base lap time there, kind of set the standard for this car before I do the engine swap and continue the development on the suspension. I'm very excited to see what kind of lap times I can get out of this car at Buttonwillow. I still have a few things to do off camera. I may or may not adjust the ride height just a little bit more, and then I got an alignment that I gotta do. I'm gonna have a little bit more camber just to kind of ensure that the tires will not contact the fenders. But other than that, this thing's pretty ready to go. We got that oil change done. A ton of stuff in this video. But that is gonna wrap it up for today, guys. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and remember, function, momentum, grip.